My name is Janice Bedane, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County. And I cannot thank you enough for coming out to our first in a series of 5 forums over 4 Thursday nights in April. Appreciate you coming out. It's going to be raining, but we've managed to miss it until 11 o'clock tonight. So thank you all so very much. You may know that our forum, by the way, will start right at 7 o'clock. This commercial has to do with the new way that we are going to be voting in Nevada County with this upcoming election. And we're calling it the Voters' Choice Act. That is what it's called. There were 14 counties that had the opportunity to participate in it. We were one of those counties, and we are participating in it. It's very exciting. It's a simplification in many ways of our current system. It really allows us to choose how we're going to vote, where we're going to vote, and when we're going to vote. And it's going to give us a much longer opportunity to cast our ballot and a greater opportunity for us to come to our decisions. So I want to introduce to you Brian Snyder. Brian is with Freed. And can you identify what Freed is exactly?
Yes, Freed is a disability and aging resource center. So if you have any issues you want to discuss with me regarding aging and disability, we help people live independent lives with dignity and hope. So please feel free to come up to me afterwards and I can talk to you about it. Thank you.
And Brian, Freed and the League of Women Voters, along with the Sierra Fund, as well as the Tahoe Truckee Family Resource Center, have been working together in a coalition to make sure that everybody knows beyond what the Clerk Recorder's Office is putting out. We're putting out additional information, and we're particularly targeting 3 communities. We are targeting people with disabilities, older adults, and Spanish speakers, and that's particularly up in the Truckee area. So that's been our target primarily, but we are also educating everybody that we can. So we're going to start with a very short 1.5-minute video that has been put out by the Secretary of State's office, and after that we will speak some specifics about Nevada County. So if you could start that.
There are exciting improvements coming to elections in the counties of Madera, Napa, Nevada, Sacramento, and San Mateo in 2018. These changes will improve when, where, and how you vote. If you live in one of these counties, all registered voters will receive their ballot in the mail weeks before the election. You have 3 choices for how to vote. First, you can vote by mail. You can mail your completed ballot as soon as you receive it. Your next choice is to drop off your ballot at a designated county drop box. Drop your completed ballot off into secure and clearly marked drop boxes that will be located conveniently across your county. Your third choice is to go to any county vote center and vote in person. These vote centers will resemble a traditional polling place, but offer voters more options. Vote centers will be open up to 11 days in a row, and at each location you can vote in person, drop off your completed vote-by-mail ballot, get help with any questions, get voting materials in multiple languages, vote with an accessible voting machine, and register to vote and vote on the same day. The California Voters' Choice Act will make voting more convenient and accessible in the counties of Madera, Napa, Nevada, Sacramento, and San Mateo in 2018. Learn more at voterschoice.sos.ca.gov.
Okay, so that's an overview of it. Let me just say what is different about what we're going to be doing and what we have been doing. It does allow us many more days. That's one of the primary things, and what's going to be make it easy on all of us, particularly those of us who work and can't necessarily get off and go on that one day to make our vote. The other thing is that it's going to offer us different ways to return the ballot. This is a broad overview that we're giving you. You are going to be getting lots of information. You'll be getting information from the Registrar of Voters Office and Elections Office in your mailbox, and then you'll be getting, and that will be coming to you prior to your ballots, and then you'll be getting additional information with your ballots as well. So if you just need to sort of know the basics right now. If you need to know real details, they will be showing up in your mailbox. We also have a lot of literature outside if you want to grab some before you leave here tonight. But the general outline is May 7th. Ballots are sent out to all Nevada County registered voters. Voters have until June the 5th to return their ballots. They can send it back by mail. And a really exciting thing is that you don't have to pay postage for that, for this election. Postage is paid. You can drop it into one of 7 drop boxes located all throughout the county, or you can go to a vote center, which Brian is going to tell you about. And the vote center is sort of the place that replaces our traditional polling place, which we are accustomed to, but will not have any longer. So mailing it back is straightforward. Drop boxes available during most business hours. There's a list of them on one of the pieces of literature we have if you are interested in knowing about them now. And then, Brian, can you tell us what we can do at the vote centers?
Yeah, just so you know, there are 2 vote centers that are open for 11 days. One of them is right here upstairs. So you can go here if you want to vote for 11 days. The specific dates are on the material that is in the back. The other vote center that's open for 11 days is the Truckee Town Hall. So you can go there as well. There's also 5 other vote centers located throughout the county, and they're open for 4 days. So like I said, that information is on the back as well. But the wonderful thing about these vote centers is they have trained staff. They're there to assist you and help you with your needs, especially for somebody like me who is blind. Anybody who has a disability, they're there to help you. For instance, if you go to a vote center, you can use an accessible voting machine. For like someone like myself, I can use screen reading technology on the machine, or actually in the machine, and it also has tactile controls as well. Now, regarding your ballot, I want to mention this because I think it's important. If you have low vision or you need like larger print, what you can do is you can call the Nevada County Elections Office and say, hey, I need an accessible ballot. They will then email you a ballot. You can complete it on your computer, or you can print it out and complete it, and then you can mail it back or drop it off at the elections office or a vote center. So that's a very convenient way for people like myself to be able to vote. And like she mentioned, all the elections materials are in multiple languages, so it's completely accessible. And as well, the voting centers themselves are accessible parking and so on. So if you have any questions regarding that, you can speak with me, or you can speak with one of the elections officials, or Janice, lovely Janice.
Yes, yeah, we can answer your questions. If you have detailed, specific to you questions that we may not be able to answer, please, the elections office is available to you, and I'm just going to say that number. You may not remember it, but it's 265-1298. And again, if you want more information, there's lots of it out there. The vote centers, what's important to know about the vote centers is that that's where you can go and get all your questions answered if you're out and about and you don't understand something, in addition to being able to call the elections office. The other thing that you can do, the cutoff for registering to vote is the 21st of May. But you can continue to register to vote up until the day of voting, June the 5th. Your ballot becomes a conditional ballot, and of course, your vote will not be counted until the elections office is assured that you are an eligible voter. But you can do it. So if you don't want to go into a conditional ballot, you do it by the 21st. But other than that, don't be daunted if you say, oh my gosh, I'm not registered. You can still do that at a vote center, and you can do it the day you vote. So we are just about ready to start. We could take a couple of questions if anybody has a question. Oh, good. Oh, great. So it's really going to be a great system, and it's going to be fairly simple and straightforward. So thank you all, and we'll just take a 5-minute break and make sure everybody can get up to their seats, and then I'll introduce our moderator for the evening. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
They won't get the materials, they won't get the ballot, they won't get the
Yeah, right.
Gary Davis.
Something was just mentioned to me that's worth repeating, which is that your registration information has to also be up to date. So if you're registered at a different address and you haven't informed the elections office that you've moved, you're not going to get your ballot because it's going to go someplace else. So you want to make sure that if you have changed anything concerning your address or your name, please make sure that you get in touch with the elections office. She's not next to Elise, but...
Hi. 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 Oh, great, okay. Not in the league form now.
Gearing up, are you?
Thank you. What's that theme in your head?
Okay, I'm back. If everybody could take their seats, we're going to start this forum. We have two forums tonight. The first one is for the, your name is, the name of this position is really, it's a tongue twister. It's the County Clerk Recorder / Registrar of Voters. It's a long title. After them, we will take a short break and we will be doing the district attorney. So again, my name is Janice Bedane. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and I especially want to thank our candidates for being here tonight, as well as our media representatives. Thank you so much. And the media will be participating with questions as well, which our moderator will tell you about. I want to also let you know that NCTV is videoing this tonight and broadcasting it. And we also have a Spanish-speaking translator back in the control room who is translating this so that we'll be able to lay that down on the video, and our Spanish-speaking community will be able to hear what our candidates have to say. I just want to, before I introduce our moderator, I want to just say the League of Women Voters is obviously a very old organization. We've been doing this for a very long time. We appreciate any support we can get, and if you do support what we do, we would love for you to become a member, or drop $1 in our beautiful little dollar box over there, or pick up some of our literature, come to our programs. We do a monthly program, and the one coming up on the 14th is particularly interesting. It's on the grand jury, and we are going to have Tom Anderson, who's the presiding judge of the grand jury, who's going to come and speak, and we also have two members of the grand jury who are going to speak as well. So it's an opportunity to learn what our grand jury does in Nevada County, and also an opportunity to find out how you might be able to get on it. So encourage you to come to that. That's on Saturday the 14th, and those always happen at the Peace Lutheran Church in Grass Valley. Aside from that, we are also having every Thursday night, as you know, forums in this room at this time. Tonight is the clerk recorder and DA. Next week is going to be our congressional representatives, and the following week is District 3 Board of Supervisors, and the last one will be the sheriff. So hope you can all make it to that. And one last little thing. We're having a really fun fundraiser and party, and it's called Vote Loud, Speak Easy, and it's going to be at the Golden Era Club Lounge over on Broad Street, and that's on May 7th, which coincides with the day that our ballots drop. So we're celebrating the new election season and the League of Women Voters and everybody who is out participating in democracy. So there's information about that on the table, and really do hope that you might be able to join us, because it's going to be fun, and you can wear costumes and even get a prize. So I'd like to introduce Stephen Munkelt. Stephen is a League of Women Voters member, and he is also on the board. He has moderated several times, and he will be the moderator for this candidate series, for the clerk recorder tonight. And then we have Mary Jane Hunegart coming in for the DA to moderate that. So thank you to all of our volunteers, and thank you, Stephen, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Janice. And I'm going to take a minute or two probably to figure out how this microphone works and how loud I have to yell. But so welcome to the forum for clerk recorder, and I think this is one of the most important sort of nuts and bolts of how local government works, because as a clerk recorder is responsible for keeping track of important records like the title to your real property, and obviously when elections office is combined with that, they're also in charge of some of the basic performance of our democracy in Nevada County. So critical functions that are performed by the office, and we have our incumbent Greg Diaz and two candidates who are challenging him, Elise Strickler and Marianne Davis. Before we get into the actual opening statements and then questions, I want to talk just a little bit more than Janice did about the League of Women Voters. Obviously, the League welcomes men as well as women. And so if you have a desire to be involved in the democratic institutions of our country and of our community, the League is really a great opportunity to be involved in what is primarily a nonpartisan way in its service of this kind of event.
You need to speak more clearly. They're not getting it in the control room.
Okay.
And if you would prefer to speak.
If I put this up here, that'll help.
Okay, great.
There. So the League does have two distinct roles, and tonight as we go through the ground rules, you'll see that we try to keep these two functions of the League completely separate. But the League has an advocacy role where it takes positions on issues, often issues about voting rights and schools, things of that nature. But there's a process for the League to reach consensus on issues and take actual active positions on issues. And I am the local league's chair for action and legislation this year, so that's part of my function for the local league. But the league also has a voter service mission, and that mission is what we're here about tonight. And in that role, the league does its very best to be completely nonpartisan and act as a conduit for getting information to the community about candidates and issues so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote in an informed way. Excuse me. So tonight we're going to have opening statements and closing statements from the candidates, 2 minutes each, and then they're going to answer questions from our media representatives and from the audience. And they'll have 1.5 minutes to answer each of those questions. And just very quickly going through the 4 media representatives we have here tonight are Paul Emery from KVMR, Alan McCormy from the Union, Jeff Flynn from KNCO, and Pascal from Ubinet, who always discourages me from murdering her last name. So we just go with Pascal. We have volunteers from our league chapter who are helping with some of the key functions tonight. One of the most important functions is time. And so we have 2 people serving as timers tonight. That's Sally and Stephanie. And so they're going to let the candidates know that they've got 30 seconds left and that they've got times up. And if somebody talks over a word, that's probably going to be fine. But if they go much more than that, it's my job to try and enforce the timekeepers. And we also have, what's very important for your participation, we also have people around the room who have 3x5 cards, and they're sticking their hands up now. We got Ben Avancino and a number of other folks around the room, and they have cards. If you don't have something to write with, they have pencils they can provide you. And that's how we get questions from the audience. And so if you want a card to write down a question, stick up your hand, and one of these people will be watching from the back of the room, and they'll come around, give you the tools so you can do that. And then when you have a card filled out or a question written down, stick up your hand and they'll pick them up, and they will eventually find their way to me. And with a little screening to try and avoid having the same question 4 or 5 times, we'll try and put those into the mix for our candidates tonight. And we'll alternate those with the media representatives. So one last thing is, because this is a nonpartisan event, we discourage clapping, cheering, jumping up and down, stomping. This is a respectful forum to listen to people's responses to issues about the office they are seeking. And at the end, we'll give you a big opportunity to do all the applause and cheering and things you want to do for these fine people who are standing up to serve our community. So, without further ado, let's go in the order away, starting close to me and going away. And Ms. Strickler, if you would do your 2-minute opening, and then we'll go to Mr. Diaz and Ms. Davis.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this event, and for all of you who are in attendance tonight, and for everyone who is at home watching on TV. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Ely Strickler, and I am running to be your next Clerk Recorder Registrar of Voters. I have grown up in this county and have been here since I was 5 years old, gone through the entire school system. I have worked for Nevada County for 7 years, of which the first 4 years were spent in the Clerk Recorder Registrar of Voters office, where I learned candidate filing, how to prepare the ballot, how to interpret code. I managed warehouse staff, I managed operations, and then I moved over to the county executive office, where I am a management analyst, and I have furthered my knowledge regarding government process, budgeting, policy drafting, and workflow. To support that activities, I have received my bachelor's degree in business administration, and I've received my master's degree in library and information science. These have supplemented my work education, I would call it, and further growth of myself by giving me the opportunity to expand my knowledge into technology and how to utilize it well in the workplace, in addition to, I took a couple of archival classes in my master's program. As an active member of our community, I have volunteered in our local libraries, at my homeowners association board, and currently serve as treasurer for the Nevada County 4-H Executive Council. If elected, I will work to ensure the sanctity and integrity of our records and election processes. I believe in fiscal collaboration, fiscal prudence, and technology utilization are essential to the success of this office. I respectfully ask for your vote on June 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good timing. Mr. Diaz.
Thank you. And thanks to the League of Women Voters. Janice, thank you very much for holding this. My name is Gregory Diaz, and I'm the Nevada County Clerk Recorder. I've been in this position for 10 years and 10 months. Back in 2007, the Board of Supervisors asked me to come and reverse the level of disarray and chaos that was in the office. The reason for that chaos and disarray was the leadership at that time had no idea about the scope and breadth of the recording statutes in California, as well as our very voluminous election code. I had the experience coming in. For 8 years, I served as a clerk recorder for the city and county of San Francisco. 4 years before that, I served as the assistant clerk recorder, city and county of San Francisco. 6 years before that, I worked in the city attorney's office, drafting litigation documents, mostly for land use issues and land use cases. After I came here, I obtained my credentials, the California Professional Election Administrator credential in 2011, and I'm also have SARA status, which is actually national status in terms of being a certified elections registration administrator. In 2015, I was elected president of the County Recorders Association of California, 106-year-old organization, quite an honor. And with this experience, there's proven leadership because we did come in, and with my colleagues, we've had an excellent office. The office is, make no mistake, we were named as one of the 14 pilot counties for the Voter Choice Act because of the work we do.
Thank you, and Ms. Davis.
Hello, and thanks to the League of Women Voters and for all of you for taking your time this evening to be here. I appreciate that. I'm Mary Ann Davis, and I really want to be your next County Clerk Recorder, Registrar of Voters, and let me tell you why. I've lived in this wonderful community for over 30 years with my husband, Scott. We raised our boys here, and we now have a granddaughter that's living here. It's a very important community to us. I grew up in Chico. I got my bachelor's in business administration there, and I've been working in the community both in for-profit and nonprofit service for the entire time I've lived here. I am a tested leader in the community. I'm the president of my Rotary Club, the 49er Rotary Club of Nevada City. I have been on several boards and in leadership roles throughout the community in many different ways. It's because I love this community. I have no doubt I can perform the duties of this job very well. I have strong management, leadership, budget, and customer service, which I think is really critical in a position like this. The county deserves good customer service. I will be working full-time at this job. I'll be very accessible and have an open door policy. The first thing I'd like to do is get to know my team, if elected, and I'd like to sit with them and find out what their goals are, what their desires are, how they see their strengths playing into the office. I feel it's important to get the team together and work toward the goals of making things very successful. I believe it's your right as citizens of this great community to be able to trust the integrity of our elections and the security of our recorded documents and vital records. It is with utmost care that I would take that position if elected, and I would be able to be trusted with those. I would be honored to be trusted with those duties. Please vote for me Mary Ann Davis. My time is up.
Thank you. And now we're going to kick off the questions with the first media question. So Paul Emery, would you like to?
The term disarray and chaos was used during the introduction of our candidates, but it certainly seemed like when the California Voters' Choice Act was presented to the Board of Supervisors, the funding provision of it seemed to fall into the category of disarray and chaos because it was very confusing, certainly for those of us out there in the community. Could each of you speak to how that kind of situation can be avoided in the future?
For responses, as a reminder, we'll have a minute and a half each, and we're going to start with Elise again on this one and go on down, and then the next question we'll start with Mr. Diaz and switch it off that way.
The Voters' Choice Act that was presented this January was known about early last year. This could have been avoided by more planning and forethought earlier in the year. This wasn't a surprise. This wasn't snuck up on. More communication was needed, not just to the public, but to the Board of Supervisors. More research was needed to be done into the program and how it would affect and what changes would need to be implemented to give more firm numbers and more solid numbers at the first presentation. I believe that to make a change would be to do a different timeline, and even if you don't have the time, maybe it would have been better to push it off an election because it is a permissive code. It is a pilot, and while it is a benefit to our county, I believe that forethought and planning and knowing what you're getting into, fiscal prudence, and knowing all of your options is important.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz.
Yes, I was the registrar who brought a resolution to the board asking for additional funding as we go toward implementing the Voters' Choice Act. The process started a year before with meetings with the supervisors, meetings with the community, written statements to both the CEO, the supervisors. We had private meetings with them. And sometimes in terms of making sausage, that's what legislation is like. I don't regret our steps. I think we were very transparent, very vocal. All the information was there. I regret not being able to answer some questions a little better. I also regret not having the CEO present, as we did work with that office as well, and they did not come down with their figures. But I think, to make a long story short, we met with the supervisors, funding was obtained, and we're very excited with proceeding with the Voters' Choice Act.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis.
Well, I think in any position of this type that communication is really key, and you need to collaborate with the department heads and the rest of the county for anybody that's affected by something like this, and with the community. They need to have some buy-in. They need to have their, and I realize they did have time for comment. But I truly think it all boils down to the teamwork and the communication on something like this. And things will happen, I'm sure. Not everything always goes smoothly, but the effort, if it's made, I think the result would be much better.
And thank you. And now we'll have the first of the questions from the audience. And it'll be Mr. Diaz providing the first answer to this one. So the question is, how do you think initiatives such as the Voters' Choice Act will improve access to the voting process for people with various disabilities, such as low vision, physical disabilities, hearing, cognitive disabilities, etc.? And if you can, please share specific examples.
The Voters' Choice Act is designed to increase participation among all of our constituents. The vote centers are set up and they're specifically designed not only to help constituents who are not disabled, but also our disabled voters, and also people who have some issues with the ballot in terms of reading the ballot, in terms of answering any question that they may have. Specifically, we have invested in what we call DAOs, our electronic voting machines, and the electronic voting machines are set up especially for the disabled voter as well as the common voter. But the important part is we have what we call a VVPAT, a voter verified paper audit trail that accompanies the electronic selection of candidates. This paper audit trail is really one of the crucial ways I have to protect the ballot box. The redundancies, the electronic machine is going to count this in the memory. We're going to have a paper audit trail, and these machines have all the attachments and have all the features to help anyone who is disabled. So we're very excited about that.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis?
Well, I agree with Mr. Diaz that these things are in place. And the way we're going to be doing this going forward is the vote centers being open for as many days as they are. People will have access and on their own time schedule that might need some assistance. And there will be really good training for the staff in those vote centers so they can assist with people with vision deficiencies or whatever the issue may be, so that people have fair and even access to voting. It's critical.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickler?
As mentioned, the Voters' Choice Act does allow more days, up to 11 days, for voters to come in and vote in person. It also expands the vote by mail, and while we have currently a high vote by mail request, this expands that to all voters. So whether or not you request it, you will be, and you're a registered voter, you will get a ballot and give you that opportunity to vote. In the vote centers, they are designed to assist people with and without disabilities. From the visually impaired, we have the touch devices, we have the hearing, and it's also Sip and Puff enabled, so you can attach your Sip and Puff device to it. And that it expands the accessibility, even on weekends, to be more convenient for voters. And it's also, all the vote centers are on areas of transit, so they're bus accessible, they're in more populated locations, which helps.
Thank you. So then we go for our next question to the media panel again, and how about Helen McCulmy from the union?
Hi, good evening to everyone. This question is specifically for Mary Ann Davis, who is an employee of the union. Mr. Diaz says he's got over a decade's worth of experience. Elise Strickler has said she has worked in that office. Why are you the best candidate for this job?
Thanks, Alan. I feel I am the best candidate for this job because of my community service, my leadership, and my management skills. True, I have not worked in the clerk recorder's office, I give you that. But what I have done is I have worked with teams, I have created huge projects, huge events in the community for many, many years. I have the skills that it takes to oversee the office. The clerk recorder registrar of voters is not necessarily the person that does all the day-to-day detail work, although that is my goal, to learn all that so I can back any position up. But it is the oversight, it is the management and the leadership. And you take your team, you manage them well, and I know it's a good team who's there now, and I'm really excited to get the opportunity to work with them. So I acknowledge that I have not worked in that office, but I have absolutely no doubt, and people who know me feel the same way, that I can do this, and I will learn what I need to learn before I start the job and as soon as I start the job. Nobody comes into a job first day and knows everything there is to know. There's a training period of time, and I notoriously learn quickly. I never made a movie before I did for the union. I didn't do a home show before I did for the union. So this doesn't begin to scare me. I know I can do this. I have every confidence, and I hope you will too.
Thank you. And I would suggest we modify the question a bit for the other two candidates. So how about for you two, what is it about your experience that you think will help you hit the ground running and do the job better?
What allows me to be able to hit the ground running is that I have worked in that office for 4 years, and then I had the benefit of moving across the hall to the CEO's office and getting the distance to see it outside and see it in the bigger picture and how it fits into government and how it fits more into the community. And I believe that leveraging both of those experiences in the office itself and in the government process and budgeting experience, policy and management experience that I've gained since leaving that office, I believe that I am the best qualified candidate to hit the ground running and make the changes that are needed in the office.
Thank you. And Mr. Diaz?
Okay, thank you. As we've mentioned before, this year's elections in 2018, we're going to showcase the new Voters' Choice Act. And I'm really proud to have played a pivotal role in allowing our county to move to that model. What else are we doing here in the Clerk Recorder's office? For one, moving to this model allows us to save $1 million next year as we need to buy new voting equipment. Our voting equipment right now is running Windows 2000, if you can believe it, but going to this model right away, we're saving $1 million. On the recorder side, we're upgrading the recording system to allow for electronic recording. Electronic recording is a win-win for the customers, for the industry, and also for our staff. Documents can be submitted at any time. Closings don't have to be held up, so lenders can dispense money, customers can get the keys to their home, and we don't have all the paper to mail back to the customers. On top of that, the election equipment, we are having connectivity throughout the county and rural places for these elections. North San Juan, typically a lot of times I feel is underrepresented. We're planning and looking into having a mobile vote center up there for one day on election day. Thank you.
And thank you. And now we're back to an audience question, and this one will go first to Ms. Strickler. And this looks like a two-part question. How do you balance these two situations? One, being sure people who have the right get their votes counted and getting past last-minute registration snafus. And two, being sure that people who aren't entitled to vote, for example, non-citizens, don't cast ballots.
I'll address the first question about ensuring that people who have the right to vote are voting. And I think the key there is communication. A lot is changing in this upcoming election. It has the same day registration. That means that you can register to vote on election day, which is expanded from what we previously had. And I think communication and having well-trained staff is essential to ensuring that the people who are registered to vote or need to register to vote can do so appropriately and execute their ballot correctly. As for the second one, I think it's, from what I've heard, it's more centered around the motor voter expansion that's occurring on April 16th. When you renew your driver's license or when you apply for a new driver's license, you will be automatically registered unless you opt out. This will greatly expand the number of people who are registered to vote, which I believe more engagement in democracy is important. And the way that we ensure that people who apply for driver's licenses who aren't citizens, the system is designed to keep those separate. So we have systems in place here at the state level to ensure that the people who are registering are supposed to be registering, and those who are not, there are stopgaps and securities in place.
Mr. Diaz?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. Two parts.
Yeah.
First, being sure people who have the right get their votes counted. For example, getting past last-minute registration problems. And two, being sure that people who aren't entitled to vote, for example, non-citizens, do not cast ballots.
Okay. Back in November of 2016, finally, after about 12 years, the state of California unveiled their statewide registration system. Right now, the state is in charge of registered voters, not the county. Also, with the Voters' Choice Act, for the first time, every ballot cast has to be associated with a valid signature of a duly registered voter in Nevada County. We certainly have our database with the signatures, but we also communicate through VoteCal with the rest of the state. If someone comes in from another county wanting to vote, we're certainly going to allow them to vote, usually through a provisional ballot, but we'll have information if they voted in another county, if they voted earlier in our county, and if they're not registered, the law has changed, so from E-15, 15 days before the election to Election Day, people are able to register, and then we will give them a conditional ballot. So registration issues won't be prevalent, and we won't have the same issues we've had in past elections because everyone will get a chance to register. With the safeguards in VoteCal, with the safeguards in our EMS, election management system, with our signature verification, we feel we're in a position to make sure every vote is counted. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
Well, there are, as you can hear, a lot of good safeguards in place to keep things safe, and the provisional ballots is a wonderful solution to people registering to vote on Election Day. So that does give some peace of mind there. One thing I think enters into this is the voter rolls, and keeping them clean is what I will do for you, keeping them purged of people that don't belong there. I'm sure it's being done. I don't know to what extent, so I'm not setting any accusations. I'm just saying that I will take care of making sure that the people on the voter rolls are the people that deserve to be on the voter rolls, and keeping people off the voter rolls, such as felons or such as non-citizens or people, you know, for many other reasons, won't be on there. And that is my goal.
Thank you. Let's see, that was a audience question, so we're now to Mr. Flynn, I believe, from KNCO for a media question.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening. And I wanted to kind of change things up a little bit. The clerk recorder is mostly associated with elections, especially this time of year, and that's certainly a critical duty, but there are several other duties that the clerk recorder has, and I don't think all of us, myself included, know what they all are. So I wanted to ask each of you if you could kind of outline what the other duties are and also your skill set that you bring to the table to deal with them.
And I believe Mr. Diaz, you're up first. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The other part of the office is the county recorder. The county recorder, we keep the official records of the county. Official records. What are official records? People use terms, and if you ask them what the definition is, maybe they don't know. But I'll tell you, the definition of official records are records of private acts in a county. You have governmental records, minutes from the Board of Supervisors, governmental meetings, but I have all the records of private acts. Recording, in most cases, is not required. It's always a permissive step, but if you don't record certain documents, you're not going to get your mortgage. You're not going to get your money. You're not going to have liens released. That's what we safeguard. These records of private acts we need to keep forever. So right now, we keep them on microfilm. We know that medium has 500 years with the correct temperature and humidity. Right now, we're scanning, age of technology. We're one of the few departments that does have archival standards. And right now, CDs, scan images, do not have an archival standard associated with it. That's why we still need to do microfilm. The experience I bring is pretty much my whole adult life, starting in 1985 until now, working in a clerk recorder's office. My time's up. Thank you.
And Ms. Davis.
Yes, having our records in a safe place is critical. with identity theft and all the different ways things can be misused, it's critical that you could trust that the office has them safe and secure, and they're there for you when you need a certified copy. That's what the recording records side does in this position. And like Mr. Diaz said, you know, you have the documents that are recorded for transactional purposes through real estate and all that. So it's a very important aspect of the job. And what I'd like to see happen is more cross-training, because while the elections, as you pointed out, is the focus right now, the staff, I think, would function more efficiently, or the office would, for the team to be cross-trained so that everyone kind of knows all those jobs, so that we have great coverage in when the peak time is being taken for elections, or when the peak times and the lines are for the records section of the office. I think that that's just part of a good management team, is to all be cross-trained.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickler?
The clerk recorder's office is responsible for all recorded documents, so the real estate transactions. Mining claims is one that people don't know about too often. Liens against your house and personal property are also recorded. They also do marriage certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, and copies of all of these documents if you come to need them. They also record military discharge papers, so all personal effects can be, and trust documents. What I bring to these is my knowledge about archival, my knowledge about technology, all of the skills that I have learned along the way, not just when I was in the office, but through my education. I can make sure that and ensure that the sanctity of your records is preserved, and that we keep up to the standards that are set by government code and best archival practices. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, next question we have here is, what are the risks or downsides of participating in the pilot run of the Voters' Choice Act? And we're at Mary Ann, I believe, is the first.
The risks and the downsides, okay. Well, while I think it's a really great opportunity to increase the number of people who vote, although we already have a very high number, 88% I believe is our last, anyway. In any new system, it hasn't been tested, so I think it's really critical that we go forward with this with all of the safeguards in place we possibly can have. It makes me a little nervous that all the ballots are going to be arriving at one time in our mailboxes, and although there are signature verifications, it's, you know, I know my signature never looks the same way twice. It's a little bit different every time. So I just hope that that machine that reads those signatures is on a tight enough setting to really read those signatures. That's a concern of mine. But I think overall, the benefits of the Voter Choice Act will outweigh those risks, as long as we are really prudent at making sure those risks are mitigated as best as we can.
Thank you. Ms. Strickler.
The Voters' Choice Act definitely expands our ability to reach more voters, as it offers many conveniences. Some of the risks associated with the Voters' Choice Act is that it is new, and new information is hard to get out to the 68,000 voters in our county. I think communication is going to be key to making this a successful pilot, because people are so used to going to their polling places on election day, and getting out that we are moving everyone to 7 vote centers. I think the biggest risk is not communicating enough. I think that we have the equipment in place to handle the vote by mail ballots that are going out. I think that the post office might be a risk, because it is a very large volume. And while I love our post office and that they have done a good job in the past, I think that people need to know that if they don't get their ballot, they need to call us, and that comes back to communication, or call the elections office. I'm in a us mode. They need to communicate very well to minimize the risks to not reaching the people, to and disenfranchising them by not communicating enough. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Diaz.
In my estimation, there are no downsides with going to the Voters' Choice Act, and the risk is very minimal. Nevada County is situated, so last election, November 2018, 82% were vote by mail. In terms of education, we're looking at 18%. Now, studies have shown out of that 18%, there's 5% that are on the fence. You know, they've been wanting to send in the application for vote by mail, and they haven't. So 5% pretty educated anyway. That gets us close to 90% of the electorate where we're engaging in a real hard education campaign. We've had meetings with the community. We've had meetings here, Eastern County. And our voter information guide last month was recognized as one of the top 3 voter information guides in the whole state of California. To my surprise, I was really surprised when the top 3 were put up on the screen. That's communication. We do a very good job with communicating clearly and concisely with our constituents. I think that's one of the reasons we were chosen to be a pilot, because of our communication and because of how we do things here in Nevada County. So risk is minimal, no downsides. It's going to work just swell, and we're going to save a lot of money.
Thank you. Then we go to our 4th media person this evening, and Pascal gets a question from you, Annette.
Good evening, candidates, and good evening, everybody. So I would like for you to tell me what you are going to do to keep votes and records safe in the age of threats, cyber threats, and can you reassure us, and can any of you guarantee us that our information will be safe for years to come?
This would be Ms. Strickler as the first responder.
I think in this day and age, our vital records and the sanctity of our votes is utmost of importance. I think that we need to collaborate with our IT department extremely well and communicate with them on our needs and what they need from the office to make sure that we are meeting the requirements. There are state and federal guidelines surrounding IT requirements for the voting systems, for the electronic e-recording that's coming up. There's security audits that are going to be in place. Guarantees are never 100%, ever. But what I can tell you is that I will work my hardest that I have ever worked to ensure that your records, that your vote, that all of your documents are safe and secure. I will work with our IT departments. I will work with the Secretary of State's office. I will work with the Department of Homeland Security. I will work with other clerk recorders and collaborate to ensure that they are safe and that you have confidence in the office. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, thanks. One of the benefits of being nationally certified as an election registration administrator is my connection with the Election Center, and monthly I get a newsletter on the cyber threats coming from the Department of Homeland Security. We also get newsletters from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and there's also the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which sends me a newsletter each month. Cybersecurity is really my communication with the IT department, because the IT department, they know about this stuff. What I know and what I can do as a registrar in terms of protecting the ballot box is physical security, personnel security, and operational security. Those are within my realm, within what I do. Operational security, chain of command, we've been having steps, and we've been doing this for years. Physical security is laid out between our office and the Secretary of State. We have guidelines for our vote centers, for our drop boxes. And personnel security, I do work with the county and our department. Personnel security is probably the weak link. That's the toughest. But those are really under my control: physical security, personnel security, and operational security.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis.
Thank you. I agree that a lot of processes are in place to keep things secure, and I also agree with Lise that You can never do a 100% guarantee, but I believe we need a paper trail, and that's why I will always be in favor of paper ballots, never the internet as a voting platform, nothing that can give us the risk of our voting being hacked or being compromised in any way. So having a paper trail, having those ballots stored so we can do a recount if necessary, we can verify. It's not, I believe in technology where it's appropriate. I also believe in being very prudent when our security of our documents and our vote is possibly compromised. So I believe strongly that is key in this office. If the most important thing in this office is the integrity of the elections, the integrity of our documents and our records. And without that, what do we have?
Thank you. And for an audience question, I think this sort of resonates with one of the earlier questions, but electronic recording, by which I think we mean the recording of documents rather than audio, why isn't it being done now, and when was it legally permitted? I think we're starting with Mr. Diaz.
Yeah. It's not being, okay, electronic recording was legally permitted back in 1998. It was done through Orange County. That was the first county that implemented electronic recording. Our system, which I bought into the county in 2008, was not ready to accept the electronic recording module in terms of the regulations that were established by the California legislature. We're in a position now with the upgrade of our recording system, Harris Computing, that we have a e-recording module, and we can seamlessly or very easily start accepting documents. We're going to start with the state agencies and federal agencies, IRS, Franchise Tax Board, EDD, and we're going to be testing the electronic submission of documents from those state agencies. But basically, it was the technology and software that was not up to par in terms of proceeding with the electronic recording, and that was my call. We're proud and we're really anxious to get started because, again, it's really a win-win-win for everyone. Basically, information is just populating set templates. The templates are sent to us by the state agencies. For example, IRS lien, that template would get populated, come into the office, and my time is up.
And Ms. Davis, do you want to respond to that one?
Well, I don't work with that machine, obviously, so I don't have the knowledge he did. I could just tell you what he just said, but that doesn't seem fair. I believe that the system we have is working well. I know no reason why it isn't. But I would like to say that I am happy to hear other state agencies are going first or did go first to do some experimentation with this process. I think it's always nice to learn from the lessons learned from other agencies.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickler?
I'd like just to elaborate on a little bit on the behind the scenes, because my opponent did give a good explanation, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes. So starting in January, they did start collecting the $1 fee to help support this system and implement this system. And they do have to go through a lot of steps. So they have to have a security audit. They have to make sure that they work with a vendor. They joined a Joint Powers Association to work with their vendors. So there's a lot of processes to go into changing or adding and expanding the service and to electronic recording. So just to give a little more background.
Thank you. And Mr. Emery, we're back to you as a media
Oh
question.
boy, I get two questions this time. President Trump's Election Integrity Commission demanded that all 50 states turn over voter names, birth date, party affiliation, any felony convictions, a decade worth of vote data, and 4 digits of their Social Security. California was one of 17 states that refused to participate in that. Our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, said, I will not provide sensitive voter information. Could you each express your personal opinion of the Secretary of State's position on this?
Ms. Davis, you're first.
Okay. I think we need to be very careful about the information that is shared publicly or potentially publicly. And so I tend to agree that it's best to be prudent and stay on that safe side of limited information being shared. I think it's critical we have what we need, but we don't need all that information to do our jobs.
Thank you. Ms. Strickler?
There are certain reasons when someone can request voter information data, and I'm assuming we did not receive the request personally in our office, in the voter registrar's office. So each request is evaluated against these sets of laws and regulations to ensure that we are only giving out the information needed to these organizations who use it for political or governmental purposes. So it's not given out just to anybody for any request. You can't use it to send mailers just for your business. So there are standards and rules in place to help protect the voters, because you're giving us your information, you're giving us your driver's license number, your home address, your phone number. All of these things is our responsibility to protect. So I believe that each request needs to be evaluated individually.
Thank you. And Mr. Diaz?
Yes, this was a request from a federal agency to the state, and I am 100% behind our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, when he refused to hand over the information to this commission. 100%.
And that would bring us to the next audience question. Going forward, what changes need to occur in the office? And that would be Ms. Strickler first.
The changes that need to occur in the office are, first, I would want to bring more communication, not just to the voters, but to the internal agencies such as the Board of Supervisors, the Assessor's Office, who the clerk's side works very close with on property transactions, our IT department, who works on images for us, for the My Neighborhood Map and other internal agencies. And then I would like to bring back candidate training for how to interact with our office. So hold forums on what to expect when you come in as a candidate from this office, so that you're not surprised, so you know what's coming, so you know the deadlines and our walk through it. And also bring people more into the office on how to be a poll watcher, or bring them in and learn about our office and make it so that we're more accessible, that people know that they can come and ask questions. Then I would also like to make our technology, utilize the technology that we have better. Our net file system needs to be more efficient. It needs to be more up to date. The past records need to be uploaded. We need more accessibility to the data. We should be giving out reports after every election on how we did, what went right, what went wrong, how many vote-by-mail ballots were rejected and why. That way we can be responsible and held accountable to the public on what we're doing as a department and an agency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Diaz?
Well, going forward, the one thing that I think should stay constant is me being the clerk recorder and registrar. I mean, that's clear. We do need to get through the implementation of the California Voters' Choice Act. Right now, we're developing a blueprint. We need to get through June. We'll learn from our lessons, and we'll have an improved process for subsequent elections. We also have to acquire new election equipment. The new election equipment these days, the technology is amazing. There are some components like ballot on demand, making sure we can have ballots printed upon request for voters who come into the vote centers. Technology now is merged into one machine, so we can have a machine that will accept votes, a machine that will be issuing this paper audit trail, which is so important to me. The machine will also issue ballots on demand. And to me, the 2020 election, going forward and having a smooth presidential, I mean, we always have pretty smooth elections, but each presidential is like an election onto itself. They're just incredible. the amount of time for preparation and conducting these elections. So I just look forward to a successful 2020.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis?
And going forward, I like to be the same as Greg, your clerk, recorder, registrar. However, what I see as things that need to be looked at in the office is training for the team and cross-training. I think there's a lot of efficiency to be had by doing the cross-training with the group. I think there's money to be saved in that respect. I also think that having solid leadership and somebody who really is present, is determined to work as a team, is there for them to back them up. And I also, if elected, would learn every job in that office so that I could back my team up. Collaboration with the other county offices is key. Communication, absolutely key. And being able to be very transparent, have that open door policy. Educating the voters, and I think with this Voter Choice Act, as much education as we can get out there, the better, because it is new to a lot of people. And I've had people approach me and say, hey, I'm going to miss my polling place. That's tradition for me. And needing to explain that this is, in a lot of ways, much better, and trying to get that word out, I think especially in a community that has an older population, is really important. I think the training of the Vote Center staff and employees, team, is critical as well, because if it's not done right there, there's room for error, and we can't have that.
Thank you. And then keeping an eye on the overall time for the evening, I think Mr. Raquelme from the union is going to have the last question, and then we'll go to the closing statements.
This is about information that you cannot just go online to get, that you must go to the office to get. I'm interested in what information that now you must go to the office to get, you want to get online so that people can access it remotely. What's the process to get that online? How long will that take? How much money would that take?
Who was first?
Yeah.
And that's, you are.
I am.
Mr. Diaz is first, yeah.
The information you cannot get online, trying to think, are voter rolls. You need to come in. That's a $50 charge. I think everything else, I'm not sure what cannot be obtained online. We put a lot of thought and effort into the questions. People can find out if they're registered to vote. People can find out if their vote by mail ballot was accepted or not. People can find out if their provisional ballot was counted or not. There are election calendars on the website. All the contests, the state contests, state propositions, city measures, municipal measures, everything is there on the website. So did you have a specific example of something you couldn't get from the website?
If someone wanted to hunt down the name or company that owns a certain piece of property, for example?
You can go on the web and you can search the official records. We don't have the documents online, and that's a statute, that's state of California. But certainly the index is there. And if you have a name, you can do that search online to find out if that person does or does not own the property. So that can be done online. Time's up.
And to clarify for those who don't recognize the term, the index is the grantor-grantee index.
Yes, the index
for real
is the
property.
grantor-grantee for the official records. That's correct.
Okay. And then Ms. Davis.
Well, I know one thing I've had trouble getting a hold of now, whether it's my own inadequacy or not knowing how to do it, is trying to get some past information on the campaign for this office from 8 years ago. Some campaign expenditure forms, they're called 460s. Not able to get a hold of those. Like I said, it could be my own ineptitude on that, but I don't think so. We requested them. My husband's requested some from the office, and that was about a month ago, and he still hasn't received them. So just from my own personal experience, that's all I can speak of here.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickler?
As I mentioned before, the office does have a lot of technology to help ease the access to the various information such as FPPC documents, the Fair Political Practices Commission documents, the 460s. That technology was purchased a couple of years ago and does need to upload all of our past scanned images that we have. They do need to be redacted, which is, it's going to take time to do that. But I think that making that a priority so that people can go online and have access to those is vital to the information sharing of elections. Being transparent on who's endorsing, who's contributing to who is important. And having access to that information is important. I also want to have access to the information on statistics about the office. So how many documents are recorded, how many marriages are happening. These are indicators of our economy and should be readily available to the public. And then I would also like to add information about past voter information guides. I think people are interested in those informations about what used to be on the ballot, what did the candidate statements that used to look like, what did the measures used to say, what were the arguments for and against that were printed. I think having those scanned and available are important to the education of our population and our history. So I think just having more of the documents that are allowable to be online and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to do the wrap up with the 2-minute closing statements, and we'll start with Ms. Davis.
Okay. Well, as you've heard, I've been in the community a very long time, and that's why I'm running for this position. I love this community. I want to serve in a much larger way than I have served, and I find this to be a role that's very interesting to me, and I have a very strong opinion that it's critical to bring integrity to this office, and I have that. I have worked with many groups in the community. I have worked on very large projects. I've worked on small projects, but I work as a team. I work with people in a very inclusive way. I think I can manage this office with the utmost respect of the team and the community. I'd like to see community service being a real positive, important part of this office and the entire county. I feel that it's critical when people come to get their documents or to file for office or to vote or to get information that they're treated with kindness and respect, and there should never be any other way to do that. So I am asking respectfully for your vote. I have the leadership, I have the management, I have the communication skills, and I have the training desire to take care of some cross-training in the office, and I really, really, really strongly believe that I could be your next clerk, recorder, registrar of voters, and I respectfully ask for your vote. And I thank you for your time tonight. I thank you, Mr. Munkelt, for conducting this very, very well, and the timers, and our wonderful media over there who I worked with, most of them. So I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all tonight, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. And Ms. Strickler?
Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate your attendance. Thank you to the League for hosting this event. I want to be your next clerk, recorder, registrar of voters because I truly have a passion for this office, for this work, for ensuring the sanctity of your vote, the sanctity of your records, making sure that things are done accurately, timely, and that I will be there to support my staff, to support this community, and ensure that not just that the election side runs properly and that the election runs well and that you have the information to make that decision and determination that it is running well, but also to ensure that you are getting the customer service and the access on the clerk recorder side, that we are celebrating your marriages with you, that we are mourning your deaths with you, that I have the leadership and I have worked and in the office for 4 years. I have worked in the CEO's office for 3 years. I have my master's in library and information science. I have been preparing for this position for years. I have been educating myself and ensuring that I know what technology is needed, what changes are needed for the office. I have been watching it critically for years, even when I was in there trying to see better ways to improve, and I will bring all of my years of experience and my education and my passion for this office to better serve our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Diaz.
Thank you. On March 8th, down in Los Angeles, Future California Elections, a statewide organization, had their annual conference on elections. I was invited to speak, to open a conference, and I was invited to close the conference. The conference was entitled Policy Meets Practice, Implementing California's New Election Laws. Asking me to serve on 2 of these panels reflects how the rest of the state election officials view the nature of our county's approach to elections. We're on the map in terms of the election world. The invitation that I received asking me to speak, very, very nice invitation, and in the invitation, and I quote, "Your leadership on this issue and concern for the engagement of your constituents has been noted by my colleagues, and we know that you will bring a great perspective to this panel." Again, we have a seat at the table. Once these elections are over, the Secretary of State is looking forward to our evaluation, our pros and cons of the Voters' Choice Act, and it's really neat to be able to represent Nevada County, to be able to represent a rural county, because the Voters' Choice Act in many, many ways is just a little too prescriptive. We need a little more latitude, the rural counties, to save money. Likewise, on the recorder side, I was elected by my peers to be president of the County Recorders Association. And again, I'm at the table in Sacramento in terms of shaping legislation. Right now, there's this ominous tax, $75 tax on documents, and I'm involved with getting this tax removed from our mining claims. These miners are coming in. It's not right, not fair. Vote for me so we can continue the excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's give everybody a big hand. Thank you all for participating in this forum. Thanks to all of you who submitted questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. And then we're going to have a short break before we start the forum with the district attorney candidate.
Yeah, we're going to be starting that in right at 8:15. So get up and stretch, and let's have the candidates switch places, and we'll get started with the district attorney.
Stephanie Manzel? Okay, great. Here, you must be Stephanie. Okay, cool. All right.
Right, right. Oh, really? That's kind of funny.
I'm good. Yeah.
That works too. Right, thank you very much.
Okay, can we have everybody take their seats for our next candidate forum, which is for district attorney? We do want to get started here real quick so we're not leaving in the rain. So please take your seats, everybody. If you are leaving for this one, you came to the first one and you're leaving for this one, goodbye, and thank you for coming. If you're just coming in, please take your seats. Oh, that happened relatively quickly. Wow. Great. Hello and welcome. Especially welcome to those of you who have just recently stepped into the chambers. My name is Janice Bedane. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County, who is sponsoring this candidate forum. And I am not going to spend much time. You missed our great commercial on the Voters' Choice Act, so I'm not going to repeat that. But if you do have any questions about the new way that we are voting called the Voters' Choice Act, we have lots of information about it out on our table, as well as information about some upcoming things for the League of Women Voters. So without any more ado, I would like to introduce tonight's moderator for the district attorney candidates, which is Mary Jane Hunegard. Did I say it right?
You did. Thank you so much.
All right. And I'm going to pass it over to her. Thanks.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Candidates Forum for the Nevada County District Attorney, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County. I'm Mary Jane Hunegard. I'm a member of the League and I'm moderating tonight's program. I'd like to thank Janice Bedane and Ben Avancino for organizing these forums. Although we've just had a forum, we will go over this evening's ground rules for the sake of any new audience members and our candidates. To present this evening's ground rules and introductions, please welcome Forest Charter High School student, YMCA Model UN Secretariat, and Youth and Government's first Gold Country delegation member and next year's delegation president, Bjorn Johnson.
Thank you guys so much. For those who have just entered, please take a moment to silence your cell phone. And we request that no videos be taken during the forum. NCTV will be broadcasting live and have a full video available in just a few days. The stream is viewable on Comcast and Suddenlink Channel 17 and on their website, nevadacountytv.org. Also, Elizabeth Ballesteros Kane is translating the forum into Spanish in real time. The translation will be laid on the NCTV video as a service to our Spanish-speaking voters. My apologies. This evening, we are presenting the candidates vying for the office of Nevada County District Attorney, or DA, currently held by Cliff Newell. Generally, the duties of the DA are to manage the prosecutor's office, investigate crimes in cooperation with law enforcement, and file criminal charges or bring evidence before the grand jury. Details about the Nevada County's DA office can be found at mynevadacounty.com. There are two candidates running, incumbent Cliff Newell and challenger Glenn Jennings. Audience questions will be written, or rather printed if possible, on cards. Will our card runners please raise their hands? These league members will be stationed around the room throughout the forum, distributing and collecting question cards. Raise your hand when you'd like a card or you're ready to submit your question. If you think you might like to ask a question, please get a card now if you don't already have one. If you think you might like to ask a question, ask questions for all candidates to answer and refrain from asking personal questions. Questions will be screened to remove or consolidate duplicates and remove personal questions. To help our screeners, please make sure your questions are brief and most importantly, legible. In addition to our audience questions, we do have a panel of local media. Candidates will have 2 minutes apiece for opening and closing statements and 2 minutes apiece to answer questions. Candidates will alternate in their order of answering questions. We flipped a coin a few minutes ago to determine who will go first. Is it, I believe, Cliff Newell who's going first? Sorry, it's Mr. Jennings. Already forgot. Courtesy is paramount to our smooth running event. Candidates will not interrupt each other, and the candidate will have the floor for their entire time. Our timers tonight are still Sally Smith and Stephanie Mendel. They will ensure that our candidates stay within the time allotted. Candidates will... Timers have cards they'll show. A yellow card will indicate 30 seconds remaining, and a red card will indicate that somebody's time is up. If a candidate is already speaking when the red card appears, they will be allowed to finish their sentence. Candidates, be please asked for no run-on or compound sentences at the red card, please. Let me remind you guys to please hold your applause until the end of the forum to allow the candidates as much time as possible to express their view on the issues, which is, I trust, why we're all here. Please refrain from outbursts. In other words, please do not cheer, boo, hiss, stomp, or any of the like. We have provided a nonpartisan setting for undecided voters to hear all positions, so any demonstrations of support or opposition to the candidates or their positions will be considered out of order. At the end of the evening, we will thank our candidates with our applause. We will adjourn at or before 9:30 p.m. Thank you for your attention and your readiness to listen and learn. I will return the forum back over to our moderator, Mary Jane Hunegart.
Now, it's time to meet the candidates for District Attorney. Based on the coin flip, our first candidate to give his opening statements will be Glenn Jennings. Glenn, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Glenn Jennings. I'm running for District Attorney. Briefly, 30 years as a trial attorney, career prosecutor. I've got over 100 jury trials under my belt, multiple murder cases on down. I retired in 2012. In 2014, my opponent called me at home and asked me to work for him. I took over the Truckee office and worked up there for a full year. That office only has one prosecutor, and that was me. I worked alongside with law enforcement, very closely with them. All their issues, they came to me for. I do have the endorsement of the Truckee Police Officers Association. I'm very proud of that. I went from part-time to second in command in 1 year. I was brought down to the Nevada City office, where I ran that 9-prosecutor office day-to-day operations. I scheduled courses, calendared cases for court, did all the custody filings, trained the young people there, taught classes in felony sentencing and search warrant law. I have to be brief, only 2 minutes. I was asked to participate in what I thought was unethical and corrupt conduct to validate search warrants from somebody who was under investigation for being untruthful. I wouldn't do that, so I left. I contacted my former boss. He hired me immediately. Where I presently work in Butte County for the last 2.5 years, I prosecute the serious and violent offenders. And for those folks who don't know who those people are, they're the worst of the worst people. There's a big difference between myself and my opponent, and that is I try cases and I prosecute cases. He'll tell you that he doesn't prosecute cases. He hasn't prosecuted a case in the last 12 years. So there's a huge difference in experience between the two of us, and it's critical when you're in a district attorney's office to have that trial experience so you can value and evaluate police reports and cases and know what to file. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear opening statements from Cliff Newell.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll try to get this done so you can get home before we get wet. I'm here tonight to ask each one of you, no matter your political persuasion or affiliation, for your support, your endorsement, and most importantly, your votes. I am the most qualified candidate for district attorney, and it's not because of the position that I've held for the last 12 years, but it's because what I've done with that position for the last 12 years. I've modernized our office technology and business practices. I've been a good steward of your tax dollars, doing more with less every year and coming in on budget. I've staffed the office with smart, professional prosecutors and investigators and staff. I've helped develop innovative programs to stop the revolving door on low-level offenders. I've helped develop programs for mentally ill offenders, programs for the addicted, and programs to assist the homeless. Recidivism is down in Nevada County, and that's an important fact. The most recent FBI statistics from 2016 show Nevada County one of only 9 counties in California that have a decreasing crime rate. That is a significant fact. My previous experience as a business manager, a business owner, a probation officer, and a trial attorney, and yes, the last 12 years as the county's chief prosecutor, make me uniquely qualified to lead this office into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no place for training field. We have significant issues facing us in the coming future. The current trend of releasing felons prematurely from prison continues. Sacramento continues to make changes and remove law enforcement and district attorney tools to enforce public safety. Now more than ever, you need a steady, tempered, experienced leader with the skills and the vision to keep Nevada County the safe place that it is. And I am that person with the skills and the temperament. I'd very much appreciate your votes.
Thank you. To get us started on the questions portion of the forum, we will begin with a media question. Let's go from left. Actually, you guys are going from right to left, but right now we're going to start with KNCO.
Oh, okay. You want to go first, Pascal? All right. Well, I do have a question. It's in my notes here, but I can ad-lib it. Mr. Jennings, we have heard from you a little bit about what Mr. Newell hasn't done in his office. I would like to know a little bit about what you would do, and mostly like your management style, maybe. And also for Mr. Newell, I guess the question for you would be on that same kind of vein would be, are there any, for lack of a better word, regrets that maybe you've had as far as management or things that have happened in your past terms?
Okay, now since Glenn went first with the introductions, we'll have Cliff go first with the answering of the question. You have 2 minutes.
For the management style, I stand behind the way I run the office. I've been accused of not doing jury trials, and that's true. Since I was picked to be the leader in the office from former District Attorney Mike Ferguson, over 8 other attorneys in the office. But what I do is I manage the office and overseen and been personally involved in every major case from the beginning to end for the last 12 years. In those 12 years, I've prosecuted 38,000 cases under my name. There's been 15 homicides and hundreds of assault and sexual cases, and we're doing something right because we have an extraordinarily high conviction rate. Recidivism is down in Nevada County, and I have no intention of doing or changing what works for Nevada County.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. What I would change, and I have to hold up my hand here to kind of diagram it out for you. I was working here in 2015. I told you I went from part-time to second in command. So in 2015, my opponent, he demoted his assistant district attorney and promoted me into her position. And I told you I wouldn't participate in the unethical conduct that I was asked to participate in, so I left. There was then an interim assistant district attorney who lasted, I think, 3 to 6 months. She left for a different county, got a job. Then my opponent hired another individual for his assistant district attorney by the name of Joe, and everything I heard about Joe is that he was a great guy, experienced, and had a lot of trial experience. He lasted about a year or so. He left for another county. My opponent then hired another gentleman, I believe he's from the Bay Area, last year. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 5 assistant district attorneys in 3 years. So that's turmoil in the office. Where I presently work in Butte County, our chief deputy just retired. He'd been chief deputy for 29 years. That's stability. What I would do and change is I will lead by example. I will prosecute the high-profile cases. My opponent here just told you he won't do that. I will. I try cases now. I try and prosecute the violent people. I'll take the high-profile cases here, lead by example. The prosecutors, I'll earn their respect. They'll stick around. I can mentor them. They'll become more effective and make this community safer.
I'd like a rebuttal. Are we allowed to do that 30 seconds?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, the only chaos or turmoil in the office was when I had to let my opponent go. Although he had never held a management position, I thought due to his extreme time in the field that he was ready to make that transition from deputy district attorney to an executive in a district attorney's office. And it became quite apparent in 9 months that he wasn't. And so I did have to have him leave the office, and I hired an interim, and then that was replaced by Joe Alexander, who for a year helped me clean up the mess that was left. And then we now have, Joe went back to El Dorado County.
Thank you. Did you want to answer rebuttal, Glenn?
You bet. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no mess left by me. I was asked to sign documents that weren't true. I wouldn't do it. He told me that I had upset the sheriff because I wouldn't sign warrants on somebody who was under investigation for being untruthful in a warrant. And we had interviewed 3 law enforcement officers who had worked closely with this individual. And I asked him one question at the end of the interviews. I said, if you were me and this individual came in with a search warrant, would you authorize it or approve it? And every one of those officers said, no, they wouldn't, indicating to me, don't approve the warrants.
Thank you. Our next question will be from the audience. Please explain the role the DA plays in overseeing law enforcement, especially the sheriff. Glenn, you go first, please.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Of course. Please explain the role the DA plays in overseeing law enforcement, especially sheriff.
Sure. What we do is a district attorney's office is an independent entity. And what I saw when I worked here is that there was no independence. The law enforcement basically told my opponent what to do and what to file. He doesn't have the experience to stand up and evaluate cases based on his own trial experience because he doesn't have any. So what we do as prosecutors, what we do where I work now, and I'll bring it here, is that we oversee that proper police reports are submitted, the elements are met by the facts, and that rap sheets, DMVs, and other documents are attached so we get a complete report before we file a case. One thing that I hear a lot about is these plea bargainings, and that's basically due to inexperience, filing a case before all the evidence is in, and then once all the evidence comes in, they change their mind, and they give a simple misdemeanor or they reduce the charges. That's inexperience. A prosecutor who's tried cases knows how to get evidence in, knows what evidence is needed for the elements, and that's what I can bring based on my experience because I charge cases and I try cases and I do that now presently. Thank you.
Thank you. Cliff?
The way we oversee law enforcement is we have, the government code gives us the ability to charge or not charge cases and to reject cases if we don't think they're appropriately investigated and brought to us, and we do that with some frequency. We typically prosecute about 68% of the cases that law enforcement bring to us. As far as the sheriff is on equal footing with the district attorney, essentially, where by case law considered, the district attorney is considered the chief law enforcement office in the community. Because I have a good relationship with all of the chief executive law enforcement officers, I would say Keith and I work well together. We don't always see eye to eye. We never have. We often differ on opinions on treatment versus incarceration or vice versa. But we work together professionally and responsibly to the benefit of the citizens of Nevada County. And that's critical. That's critical to have chief executive officers work together for your benefit. If we don't, then it's pandemonium. My opponent, when he was working for us, got in a tiff with the sheriff's department. He also got in a tiff with Truckee PD brass and the town council up there, and those were a couple of the items that led to his demise. I'm done.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Yes.
That's the first I've heard about any problems up in Truckee. Again, I have the endorsement of the Truckee Police Officers Association. I worked closely with them for a year, and it's important to understand what an endorsement means. They want me to be your next district attorney. They've worked with my opponent for the last 12 years. They know his work product, and they know my work product. And they're shouting out a voice to you, ladies and gentlemen. There's no tiff between me and anybody else up in Truckee. This is the first I've ever heard of anything like this. It's kind of interesting. But again, time's up.
Thank you. Cliff, do you want to respond?
No.
Okay.
No need.
Then our next question will be from Eubanet.
Let's see. Talk about your approach to reduce the perception that there are a lot of frequent flyers in the judicial system here in Nevada County, and what can or cannot be done to reduce the number of said frequent flyers.
Okay, the person to go first will be Cliff.
Yeah, what we've been doing with frequent flyers, and that's been something ongoing. That came up as a big issue in the last election, and what I did was I put myself in the courtroom every morning on the in-custody calendar so I could identify those people and figure out what it was that was causing that perception. This is where facts matter. We've set up programs where we offer the frequent flyers higher amounts of jail time, and they can trade that off with various treatment programs. Either way, they get off the street and they stop becoming a revolving door, and that has worked for us. And that's again where our statistics matter, because if you look at the DA's statistics, the sheriff's statistics, Truckee PDs, Grass Valley PDs, Nevada City PDs, crime is flat or dipping. So we're making a difference, and we'll continue to accentuate those programs because we have to. With Prop 58, Prop 47, AB 109, we're getting more and more people back into the community from the state prisons. We're able to send less people to state prison because of the restrictions of Prop 47. So we better be working now on preparing systems and programs to keep those people diverted from the system and keep them safe and keep Nevada County safe.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. Frequent flyers I classify into two types. One are the felony frequent flyers that we see quite often. They'll get probation, they'll commit another felony while they're on probation, and sometimes they'll get probation again for that felony. The other type I consider are the misdemeanor type people who commit a small vandalism or drunk in public, and they're released back in and they do this over and over again. I think to get rid of or solve the problem for the misdemeanor type frequent flyers, it's important to talk with the court and get their acquiescence with the program so that it's a scale that is imposed by the court and is known to defense counsel and the prosecutors, that as these people come back, the punishment gets worse and worse and harsher, unless of course they're in treatment program and they need some type of treatment for alcohol or drug abuse, and they can be returned to society as productive citizens. As to the felonies, again, it's a harsher sentence each time they return. 30 seconds. And again, that's with the court system, and it's easier with the felons because the courts understand that these people commit felonies, which are far more important and need far more punishment as they come back over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question will be from the audience. How do you plan to train your staff to work with people who struggle with mental illness and who may also be homeless? Glenn.
Okay, we have collaborative courts, and it's mental health courts, there's veterans courts, there's drug courts. These people are evaluated by the probation department, and they're put in the proper rehabilitation, and I'm all for that. Some of these people have had hard times, they're addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol, and if we can rehabilitate those people, it's best for all of us because they become productive citizens. So there's the courts out there that handle that, the collaborative courts. I've handled those courts where I work, and sometimes they're very effective. They don't work all the time, but to those people that are rehabilitated, it's actually a great thing. I've participated in a lot of celebrations, and they've gone on to get jobs and become very productive. So as far as mental health or veterans or drug abuse, those courts are out there, they exist, and they're a very good thing and a productive part of the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Cliff.
Well, frankly, that's a good question, and I'm very proud to say that I have been part of those courts from the inception, back from when we did co-occurring disorders. I work closely with NAMI, the Forensic Task Force on Mental Illness. We have our attorneys go through crisis intervention training so they know when they're in the courtroom and when they're dealing with somebody who exhibits mental illness, They kind of know how, they recognize that, and then they look at other options maybe for resolving the cases. And our specialty courts, or our collaborative courts we call them, takes us out of the typical role of district attorney and public defender or defense attorney, and we work more collaborative. We try to figure out what it is, they call it the criminogenic needs, what it is that drives this person to commit crimes, and then we address those specifically with treatment plans and with close observation from treatment providers, and we're really there to facilitate getting them into the program by making an agreement with the defense attorney that they'll get in there and they'll have some benefit for completing the program. And those have been very effective. And when they are, that's really the best thing that happens in a district attorney's life, in my opinion anyway, when somebody walks out the door and starts a new life with a family and a job, and it's so diametrically opposed to when we send someone to prison, which is always a sad thing because there's victims involved and you're ruining many people's lives. But sometimes you have to do that.
Thank you. The next question will be from KVMR. And please answer your question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a few years ago there was a racial incident at Rawlins Lake that really got national attention, and it was a African American family that were having a reunion at the lake, and they were, in their view and in their public talks about it, were treated pretty badly by people in the campground next to them. Also, there was a racial incident in Grass Valley. I'm just using two examples. Maybe less than a year ago, that inspired a march up Grass Valley with several hundred people participating in it. To the best of my knowledge, nobody was ever charged with either of these incidents, or to the best of my knowledge, we've never had a charge of racial instigation in Nevada County. I may be wrong on that. Could the two of you speak to those incidents, those in particular, if you know anything about them, and the topic in general? Are we ignoring the racist problems we have in Nevada County? Is it being ignored by law enforcement?
Thank you. And Cliff, you'll answer first.
Sure, I know all three cases intimately. The latter that you spoke of with Jamal's son, that was not referred to our office for prosecution. So if it's not referred to us, we don't deal with it in that aspect. The first you mentioned, the Lake Rawlins incident, that was two groups of people behaving badly. I sent my detectives out to investigate that thoroughly. What we got was a lack of cooperation from one side. They had a live video that they had taken, and we tried to acquire that video as evidence, and they refused to cooperate with us. So at the end, and I actually met with Jamal because he's an activist in that area, and we sat in my office for about an hour and a half and went over those police reports, and I showed him why I couldn't prosecute it, because it wasn't a racially motivated incident. And I'm not going to get into all the details because they get kind of nasty, but yeah, there was some absolute foul words said, but it wasn't what the strict legal definition of racially motivated was. So with lack of cooperation and the lack of the appropriate evidence, we didn't charge that. And there was a third incident in Nevada County where a young man ripped his shirt off and showed his swastikas on his chest and then attacked a young black man, and we prosecuted that to conviction. And I have to report these numbers every year to DOJ, so I keep track of them, and we just don't have a lot of reports of racial issues. And we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of diversity in Nevada County. We see that slowly changing, which I think is great.
Thank you. Glenn?
Sure. I've prosecuted, I think what my opponent's talking about is called a hate crime. And when racial epithets are used, there are certain statutes you can allege in the complaint, and it's called a hate crime. I've prosecuted a couple of those cases when the facts warrant them. I'm not familiar with the particular cases up here. You are, and my opponent is. But again, I've prosecuted those types of cases and convicted those people. But the facts have to support the charges, and that's based, again, on experience. You need to be an experienced prosecutor to know what the charges are and how to prosecute those cases. So, again, I'm not familiar with these particular cases, but I have prosecuted hate crimes, to conviction. So, and I'll do so in the future if they arise again.
Thank you. The next question is from the audience. How do you define plea bargaining, and when is it not appropriate? And Glenn, you'll go first.
Sure. As I said before, I now prosecute the serious and violent offenders. And for those of you, those are people who commit strikes, the worst of the worst people out there. And I generally don't plea bargain those at all. Let me just give you an example. One of the trials that I had last year involved a looting case, and it involved the mandatory evacuation due to the Oroville Dam emergency. I think we probably all remember that last year, the thousands of people that were evacuated. Well, this fella decided to go into that particular area, thought it was easy pickings, and he destroyed the guy's house, looted a barn, and stole some vehicles. That case involved circumstantial evidence. There was no fingerprints, no DNA, no video surveillance. It was a circumstantial evidence case. I prosecuted that case. I did not plea bargain it. My offer was to plead as charged. They declined. I went to jury trial on that case. It was also based on a theory of aiding and abetting. Now, let me tell you, folks, you better know what you're doing when you go down on the case and circumstantial evidence based on a theory of aiding and abetting. And I must point out that my opponent would not have a clue how to handle a case like that.
Thank you. Cliff?
Best practices in every office demand that we negotiate and resolve cases. The important part, you do it based on the facts and the value of the case. And you don't give plea bargains. It's a way to resolve. It's a negotiation process. A year, I handle 3,500 cases in my office under my name. If we were to take all those to trial, that would be, what, 290 some cases a month. Obviously, you can't do that. So what we do when it's not appropriate, and the way we're able to do good negotiating, is that we go to trial. And my attorneys do a good job. And we in the office have shown our history. In 2015, we did 20 trials. In 2016, we did 22 jury trials. 2017, there were 18. And so far this year, we've done 4, and we've got about 6 lined up in the next couple months. So that's how you have a strong negotiating position, by showing that you go to trial when you can't come to a reasonable resolution with the defense bar. And we do that. And we are in a strong bargaining position. And again, my statistics show that we're doing the job well, and we're getting the convictions we need to, and I think we're getting fair resolutions on our cases. We're resolving a homicide case today, just as we spoke. We finished, the last thing I did in the office was put the finishing touches on that with my assistant district attorney. So we're doing it well, and it works for us in Nevada County.
Thank you.
May I rebut?
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to go to mynevada.com and look at the job description of the district attorney. It's on there. The pay is about $183,000 a year. And one of the duties under important is to handle and prosecute high-profile cases. That's one of the duties of the elected district attorney. My opponent won't prosecute a case, hasn't prosecuted a case in 12 years. He just told you this. I will prosecute cases. So that's one of the requirements. Thank you.
Cliff, would you like a rebuttal?
Nah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to our media panel. It's time for the union to ask a question.
Hi, good evening. Deputy Jason Mackey has become an issue in this campaign. I want to ask, why do you believe his actions are key to this campaign, or why do you not believe that? Do his actions show corruption in the district attorney and sheriff's office?
Cliff?
Well, this is another one where facts matter, and I do not believe that Jason Mackey did anything incorrect. It is coming out in the court right now in the hearings. We're getting positive results from the judges, and the bottom line is there wasn't even a mistake. The problem was that, given the opportunity back in 2015, when he had a young person who had written his first sealed search warrants and had found a discrepancy in one of the warrants between a sealed portion and an open portion, he came to the prosecutor that was handling the case for guidance, and that prosecutor refused to look at the case at all, didn't even read the search warrant until in 2018 when he was required to, and my opponent dismissed the case based on the officer's request because the officer was freaked out a little bit. That was a missed learning event for the prosecutor. Prosecutors don't let policemen tell them to dismiss cases. We're basing our decisions on facts. We look at the police report, we read the warrants there, we sit down with the officer, and we figure out, how do we fix this? What's the problem here? And if we had done that early on, we wouldn't be here 2.5 years later arguing about whether Mackey does. And I will support that young man because I looked at everything he wrote, everything he did, and he did nothing dishonest. And I'll never, for political expediency, throw another person under the bus, even if it gets me unelected. The kid did nothing wrong, and I will support him throughout, and we'll get positive results from our court that we're doing right now.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. I was the one handling that case, not my opponent. I stood in front of the courtroom to inform him of what questions he could be anticipated to be asked. I've done this hundreds of times. I've dealt with hundreds, if not thousands, of police officers. And that's the first time in all these 30 years I've ever had a police officer tell me they couldn't take the stand, which means they couldn't swear that their affidavit was true. I asked him why. He pointed to the address of the residence that was searched, and he said, I didn't have this information at the time I wrote the warrant. Now those, ladies and gentlemen, are big red flags. Out of the hundreds of cases I've handled, that's the only time that's ever happened. I asked him what he wanted me to do. He asked me to dismiss the case. It's another big red flag. So I did. I came back to the office. I told my opponent, who agreed we needed to investigate this case. We brought in 3 law enforcement officers who worked closely with this individual. One of them had been his supervisor. Again, they told us stories of misconduct on the behalf of this individual, and I asked each one at the end of each interview, if this guy brought a warrant to you, would you approve it? And every one of those officers who had close ties with him said, do not approve his warrants. We started to continue the investigation. My opponent stopped it. We were trying to get the warrants from the court, and he says he read the warrant. He read the wrong warrant. The original warrant from the court recently came out 2 weeks ago in court. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be from the audience. What would you do to ensure your prosecutors seek the truth and justice and not a, quote, win at all cost stance? Also, what would you do to scrutinize sheriff interviews and reports for correct questioning techniques, especially of minors? And this will be Glenn's.
A lot of questions in one 2-minute thing, so I'll start with the first one. Again, it boils down to experience, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got the trial experience, if you've been in the courtroom and you litigated motions and trials and preliminary examinations, you can mentor the young prosecutors because they come in pretty zealous and they're willing to prosecute almost anything, and you have to kind of calm them down somewhat. And the only way you can do that is through your own experience from trying cases. I've trained young prosecutors how to try cases in front of juries. I've taught cases and I've taught lessons on search warrant law, and I've taught felony sentencing classes. These young folks need a mentor, and the only good mentor is somebody with experience. Numerous times where I'm sitting in my office today, even today, somebody was in trial and they come back during lunch and they have a question. Hey, how do I get this particular evidence in? Or there's an objection here. I can answer those questions. My opponent can't. And that's where the mentoring, the day-to-day mentoring is so important. And again, it falls on somebody who's experienced. You want the district attorney to be the most experienced person in that office so that the people below you can come to you for guidance and questions, and you'll have the right answers. Unlike my opponent, again, I can't stress it enough, he just told you he doesn't prosecute cases. He doesn't have that critical experience to help his folks.
Thank you. Cliff?
The way we avoid that in our office is by staffing cases often. It's a small office. All of the attorneys are in a single hallway. We have open doorways between one another, and we know every case that's going on amongst other. They talk back and forth. They have a very good assistant district attorney who they can rely on. They can come into my office anytime and talk about cases, and we do that. We do that frequently. And then, of course, I send them to training. I set about $30,000 aside a year out of our budget. That's a good use of your tax dollars by making sure each one of my deputy district attorneys go to a one-week training away from the office, so they get to network with other attorneys in the state. They develop relationships, and then we use California District Attorneys Association, and they're allowed to go down to Sacramento on any one-day training as many times a year as they want. And they all take advantage of that because they like getting out of the office and getting that education. And then we have attorneys that specialize in certain fields like sexual assault, and we get them to various trainings throughout the year with special funds that we set aside, so they're the highest trained individuals in the office in that field, which are very technical in their prosecution aspects. And we generally just keep apprised of one another. I'm in the office every day. I'm not an absentee district attorney. I'm in there advising them. They're from the beginning to the end of the cases, especially the big cases. I'm consulted throughout, and that happens every time. And again, all I can do is point back to my numbers.
May I rebut?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I was working up in the Truckee office, I loved working up there. There was a murder case going on down here in Nevada City. It was a Nix Hollingshead case. I don't know if you recall that. It was a gentleman that pulled up into his driveway. Some people ambushed him. They shot him and bludgeoned him to death in front of his mother. The senior prosecutor in Nevada City called me up in Truckee and said, look, the defense attorneys keep continuing this matter. What can we do to stop it? I said, why don't you convene a criminal grand jury? She didn't know how to do that. I said, well, have your boss do that. It's not that difficult. She goes, he doesn't know how to do. Can I complete the thought?
You can complete the sentence.
So I had to come down from Truckee and show her how to convene a criminal grand jury. I had to help her out because nobody else knew how to do that.
Thank you. So our next question, did you want to rebut? Yeah. Okay. Our next question will be from our media panel, and KNCO, sorry to blindside you there at first.
That's okay.
Okay.
I guess I kind of left off with me last time, I think. There was a case, I guess it was about a year or so ago now, woman driving an SUV drunk hit someone and killed her. Because she had a prior DUI, she was eligible to be, for murder charges to be filed against her. Recently, there was an accident in Merced County where a woman who was drunk crossed the median, hit a car full of Nevada Union High School students, killed two of them. She has not had a previous DUI. It's an out-of-county case, but she would not be eligible for murder charges. I guess my question is, where do the two of you stand on, I know there's a specific name for that law. Where do you stand on that law, and also how do you handle, I guess, drunk driving cases in general?
Thank you. Cliff, you may go first.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I just did our drunk driving statistics last week, and we've gone from about 750 DUIs in a year down to 580, and we have a 93% filing and conviction rate in those cases. Specifically to the DUIs where there's you call them a Watson murder or a homicide. In that particular case, we chose to do that as a vehicular homicide rather than a murder case because there were some mitigating circumstances. They were all drinking together. The victim didn't put her seatbelt on, and it's by no means the victim's fault, but they were all kind of partying together, and they were taking this little four-wheeler out for a spin, and she died. We just had another homicide where a young man was driving down Highway 20, rolled his car, and killed his 2-year-old. That we are prosecuting as a homicide, Watson murder, because he does have 2 prior DUIs. He's been admonished twice that you're potentially going to kill somebody if you keep driving when you're drunk, and he did so, and the most tragic person he could possibly have killed was his own son. So that's kind of the difference. You have to analyze all the facts. It boils down to any individual case. There's always aggravating circumstances, mitigating circumstance, and there's always a human condition involved. And those are the things you have to look at as a prosecutor to make a fair decision on how you file the case. And those are the ones that we agonize over the most, and we staff back and forth the most until we come up with the appropriate filing decision.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. I've actually prosecuted myself Watson murder cases. It's a case that came out of Tehama County in Northern California. It's a second-degree murder case, and it's based on their knowledge prior to them drinking and driving and killing somebody. And that comes from the plea forms, generally from their misdemeanor convictions. And there's a box they check and they sign. And one of the boxes says, it's a warning that if you drink and drive in the future, you could be charged with murder. And if they have a couple of those, it maybe even just takes one, that's enough to give them notice, and we charge a Watson case. Now, I've also prosecuted many murder trials, and what I found is that the murderers generally kill somebody they know. The drunk drivers that kill people are the scariest ones because they take us out at random. And I have very little tolerance for drunk drivers. Again, I've prosecuted Watson murder trials, and I know what it takes. You can get in information that they drove on a suspended license to help prove that they had prior knowledge. These are all elements that are important, and you need to have that experience before you can properly analyze whether to charge a murder case or not in these particular situations. And again, it's based on prior experience, actually having gone down there and doing it.
Thank you. Next question comes from the audience. Given how closely the DA office must work with law enforcement to prosecute cases, isn't there an immediate conflict of interest when it comes to charging and prosecuting crimes committed by law enforcement? What will you do to eliminate this conflict of interest? Glenn?
Are you talking about crimes committed by law enforcement officers?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Yeah, they would be looked at. Is there a conflict? Sure, there's an inherent conflict. I mean, we work day to day with law enforcement, and to suggest that there isn't is a fallacy. You look at the facts of the case. We just recently prosecuted a police officer from Paradise last year. He came across a scene where there was a car accident he had chased. The car flipped over on its side. The gentleman was getting out of the car. The officer was approaching him, pulled out his gun, and accidentally discharged, shot the individual in the neck, and killed him. We ended up prosecuting that police officer and got a conviction. So is there a conflict? Yes. But if the facts support the proper charge, we will prosecute police officers who commit crimes. They're human beings. They make mistakes like the rest of us.
Thank you. Cliff?
I don't think there's a big conflict there, and if it's somebody who is somehow more intimately involved than somebody else in the office, you always have the option of recusing your office and asking the Attorney General to take the case. We typically don't do that. You pay me to prosecute cases, and I use my best judgment, and we do so. We have prosecuted over the last 12 years, I recall, 3 law enforcement officers. The most recent one was a CHP officer who was caught up in lying on his divorce papers and submitting false documents to the court. And CHP brought the investigation to us, and we prosecuted the case to conviction. That's what you do, and you look at them no different than any other person. And we have a very lot of power as a district attorney and as a prosecutor in general. And we have that ability to initiate the system against a person, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And we are an independent agency. That's why we're elected. That's why I don't have control of the sheriff, I don't have control of the chief of police, and they don't have any control over me. The control I do have over them is that I can reject their cases, I can ask them to do a better job. I've got my own police agency, the 7 detectives that work for me, and I can ask them to go out and investigate cases. And so that's how we keep the conflict of interest. When a law enforcement officer is charged with something, we typically do the investigation. And my guys are neutral in that aspect. They're cops. They're darn good cops.
Thank you. Next question will be from our media panel. Yubanet.
Let's talk a little bit about juvenile offenders. Nevada County, in the latest statistics from June 2017, the juvenile hall has a capacity of 60 beds, and there were 10 juveniles confined, and 1 was confined from the state. In your opinion, prosecuting juveniles, what special circumstances or what special mitigating circumstances do you look for before you confine juveniles? And in your opinion, is it a waste of taxpayer money to keep a juvenile hall that is not even, it's barely 20% full?
Thank you. Cliff?
Great question. Thanks, Pascal. Our juvenile hall does house total 60 people. It's set up to take 30 right now. And of the 10 you're talking about, there's probably only 3 or 4 Nevada County citizens. The rest of them are farmed in from other communities because we have the space. That being said, juvenile justice is completely different than our regular prosecutorial role. That's more of a collaborative court with a very specific drive of rehabilitating the youth and trying to keep them out of prison and jail. And that's what we've done very well. We have a very proactive probation department with Mike Ertola, and they find alternative ways to divert the youth. And I'm very proud of the numbers we have, because it used to be when I mentioned I was a probation officer years ago. When I was a probation officer, we constantly had that place at 18 to 25, even up to 28 kids, and it was only set for 20-some. So we've done a great job in Nevada County of decreasing the prosecution of juveniles, diverting them earlier, holding them accountable, but turning them loose out of informal probation at an earlier time, so they're not on probation as a juvenile, and they can get on with their lives. And we've been effective at doing that, and that's one of the things we do best with the relationships in Nevada County, because we all work together to that common goal, and that's what makes our community safe and healthy.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. Thank you. It's important to distinguish juveniles and age groups. The juvenile law is set up to rehabilitate juveniles because of their youthful age, and probation generally does a really good job at that. But every now and then you'll get a juvenile who commits a really heinous crime. And some of the crimes, I've prosecuted some of these juveniles. What you have to do is, so they're between the age of 16 and 18, and that's to distinguish their ages. You can bring what's called a fitness hearing and try them as an adult. And some of those cases that I've brought to trial and went through the fitness hearing are crimes committed by these 17-year-olds. They happen to be 17 years old. I can't even describe it to you. It's so heinous. But when you listen to those facts, you'll agree that they should be tried as an adult and prosecuted as an adult. The other ones, under 16, yeah, probation takes care of them. They're under rehabilitation. They deserve a second chance because of their youthful age, and they should be given a second chance under rehabilitation. But again, occasionally a really bad child happens between the age of 16 and 18, and a fitness hearing is needed to be tried as an adult. Again, I've done those in the past. My opponent has not.
Thank you. Next question comes from our audience. Several initiatives and statutes in the past few years have directed the justice system to move away from mass incarceration as the single response to crime and toward evidence-based alternatives. Do you support these changes going forward? Glenn?
You know, it's interesting. As a prosecutor, we're basically an animal of the law. We don't criticize the law. We can. We don't make the law. We don't modify the law. We obey the law, and we prosecute under the law. If people pass Proposition 64 and Proposition 57, those are the laws we have to deal with. And I look forward. I don't look backward on them, but I look forward to try to continue prosecuting with what we have. Now, some of those laws are kind of frightening, at least in my opinion. Proposition 57. I put 12 violent people away over the last few years, and they've sought early release. So I get a notice from the parole board, and I have to respond to those, because I don't want to get into detail. It's too detailed, but they can get out on what's called early parole, where they're supposed to be in for 28, 30 years. They're now looking to get out after only 3 years in prison. And so I had to respond to those. I wrote responses to those individuals, and 11 of those 12 people have been denied early release.
Thank you. Cliff?
I was actively opposed to Prop 47 and Prop 57. I signed up. I fought for it on a statewide basis. That being said, I lost. And so at this point, I fully embrace that. And I'm not only involved, we've been developing programs to handle just this exact thing. When I said that we cannot sit on our laurels now, and we need to be proactive in programs we're developing, because this pendulum hasn't quit swinging yet. There's going to be more changes in laws come out of Sacramento, and we darn well better be prepared to handle them. You better have a district attorney who has the relationships, the background, and the expertise at developing alternative programs and the desire to divert people from the criminal justice system. Because if we don't, then we're going to have a huge group of people that are just going to be reoffending, and because of the change in the laws by Prop 47 and 57, they'll either go to prison and come back earlier, or we'll be putting them in our local jail and filling our local jail up, and that doesn't do any good either. So there's a multifaceted plans going between the various captains at the jail, my office, the public defender's office, the probation department, and the courts, and we're figuring out ways to divert people, to treat them differently, to get them out of the system and back into our community. That's, again, how we build a safe, healthy community. Every one person we take out of that criminal aspect and re-divert them into the community, like the people in our drug courts and our mental health court and our other alternative courts, our DUI court, they save themselves and they save other people who see them succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question will be from our media panel. KVMR, you're up.
As we are all aware, there is quite an epidemic of opiates addiction in the entire country. Do each of you believe that Nevada County is allocating a proper, say, percentage of its law enforcement and prosecution resources to dealing with this epidemic situation? Should we increase what we're doing?
Thank you. Cliff?
Yeah, obviously the opiate issue is huge. There's been some developments recently. We now are going to have a methadone clinic here. We have 2 very good treatment facilities. And knowing how and when to prosecute these people is key. And now here's, again, another innovative program that we've started with Grass Valley Police Department. Now the cops can pick somebody up who they recognize is not necessarily a safety risk to the community, but they're a risk to themselves because of their addiction. They can bypass me with my approval and go straight to a treatment center. That is an innovative program. Those are the type of things we're doing in Nevada County. As far as the amount of money, because no, you never have an amount of money, because the biggest part of solving that type of crime is the case management, the case work, a person helping the person navigate through life without falling off and getting high or going to their addiction, whatever it may be. So we don't have a high enough percentage of money. But that being said, I and the other leaders in the community dedicate our time and our staff to make these collaborative courts. We don't get paid. We try to get grants for them. We're too small to get grants. But what we do is we go out there and we say, okay, I'll give you this attorney and this amount of time, and we'll develop this program. And that's what we need more of, and that's what we're developing more of. We're now in a stepping up program where we're trying to recognize mentally ill people and keep them out of the jail because there's such a high propensity in the jail. I got the red sign.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. I've probably got a few years on some of you here, and when I first started prosecuting cases, there was a tremendous heroin addiction, it was opiates, and it was basically black tar heroin, and there were many, many addicts around. And it went on for a few years, and then a new type of heroin was introduced, and it was called White Horse. It came from China, and it was about 10 to 20 times more powerful than the black heroin that they were presently using. And all of a sudden, people were dying left and right. That faded, and there was a period of about 15, 18 years where I didn't see any heroin for a while. And now it's coming back, probably because of the prescriptions, and then when they run out of prescriptions, they turn to heroin again. And what I saw when I was here, because I went to the Narcotics Task Force meetings every week, is black tar heroin making a comeback. And I think law enforcement should be more involved in interdicting heroin, even though it's considered not as dangerous as methamphetamine because people tend to be mellow. But for the fact that once they get addicted onto the black tar heroin, I'm afraid, and I can almost guarantee you, there's going to be an introduction of white heroin again, and you're going to see a lot of people dying out there. So I think law enforcement should be more heavily involved in interdicting the black tar heroin as it's now becoming more prevalent.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the audience. Cliff, you had mentioned the Stepping Up program. Let's get more into that. How will you work with the Stepping Up program, Glenn?
The Stepping Up program is something I am not familiar with, so I don't have any comments on that.
Okay, thank you. Cliff?
Stepping Up is a nationwide program of law enforcement people, community members, treatment professionals, jail professionals, and just using our own numbers, we did a survey, and anecdotally, we have about 40% of our jail can qualify as mentally ill with some sort of DSM-V5 diagnosis. But for that mental illness, many of them wouldn't be in there. So what we're trying to do as a group, I'm working with the Sheriff's Department, the jailers, probation, and we're figuring out a way to do early warning signs to figure out when people really are mentally ill and they're coming into our jails. So the most recent thing we've done is created a fact sheet that the sheriff's going to have on their website. So if you're a parent or a sibling or a friend of somebody who's mentally ill and they get arrested, you can get that fact sheet. It tells you what's going to happen to them. It tells you how to get their medications to them so they're not in the jail and coming off their medications. It gives them the background that they need to initiate them. The other thing we do, like I said, I do all the morning arraignments. When I see somebody there that I know is mentally ill or homeless, I have 2 cards in my bucket and of the treatment providers in town, and I say, okay, Joe Blow is in jail. He's going to be there till next Wednesday. And that's all I say. I don't say why they're there or what they're doing, but it gives the opportunity of behavioral health people to get over the jail and interview those people. And then if they come back to me and say, well, look, he's having a crisis, but we can move him over to Boast House or one of the other treatment facilities, I say, okay, OR him and let him go. That's how we're working with Stepping Up, and it's getting better.
Thank you. The next question will come from our media panel. Does the union have a question?
Of course. Many defendants in the county currently are allowed to plead no contest. This differs from different parts of the state as well as other states. So I'm curious, is there any real difference between a guilty plea versus a no contest plea? Why do things this way? Should it be done differently?
Thank you. Cliff, you're up.
In most cases, there's no difference. You give a no contest plea, that just protects them potentially from civil liability if they've got something going on. But there are those circumstances, like in the homicide pleas we took today, we made them plead guilty, and they did, and we made them give an allocution saying what they did and how they did it, and we're probably going to use them in an upcoming trial against the third defendant. Those are the times that you have to have a guilty plea, and you sometimes have to force that. But generally, it really doesn't make a difference in the end run. It makes the defendant feel better. Again, if there's some civil liability that they feel they might be at, that'll help them. It won't help them avoid it, really, but it makes them think so. So, no, I don't see a real difference for it, other than in those special circumstances when you want to insist on a guilty plea for a specific purpose as far as future trials or managing the case.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. There's no difference as to penalty between a guilty plea and a no contest plea. We do insist that they plead guilty to spousal abuse cases because that can have an effect on the civil restraining order and the family law courts or the juvenile 300 cases where their children have been taken away from them. So, but generally as to criminal penalties, it has no difference whatsoever.
Thank you. We have time for one last question from the audience. During the housing downturn beginning in 2008, foreclosures were rampant in Nevada County. So were reports of owners removing fixtures, including plumbing, bathtubs, etc. Presumably, this was illegally defrauding lenders of their security and driving the costs of mortgages up. Why was no one, to my knowledge, prosecuted to stop this? Glenn?
Well, I don't know about here, but we do prosecute those cases where I work. They're fact-driven. If the police reports come in and the facts show that there's vandalism and or grand theft in these particular cases, and it's done maliciously, we will prosecute those people. And occasionally those files come in. We haven't seen too many of them, though, and that's basically a function of law enforcement reporting. And so if we don't get those reports, we can't look at them and evaluate them and prosecute them. We did get a few of them during the downturn, and we did prosecute quite a few of those. But unless they come into our office for evaluation, we don't prosecute them.
Thank you. Cliff?
Yeah, I'm kind of searching my brain. It's a while back, but I don't recall having any of those referrals to the office. Oftentimes, they're considered a civil issue, and they're handled in the civil courts. Sometimes they could be criminal, as my opponent indicated, and it's a fact-driven situation. So we'd have to have more specifics, and we'd have to have law enforcement agency do the investigation and refer them to us. And to my knowledge, I haven't had any of those.
Thank you. So it's now time for closing statements. You'll have 2 minutes apiece, done in reverse order from opening statements. To begin, we'll hear closing statements from candidate Cliff Newell.
Thank you. I've worked diligently for you for the last 12 years. As a team, under my leadership, our office has overcome a budget crisis, major shifts in the criminal justice system, but through all of that, we've seen crime rates remain low and even decrease. Every task we do, to diversion, specialty courts, jury trials, sending someone to prison, have one common goal, and that's public safety. Every move I make as a leader comes back to one question. If I do this, will Nevada County be safer? It's that simple, but that simplicity is deceiving. To achieve that goal, the leader must be effective in multiple arenas. They must have vision. They must set policy, physical management, budgets, public relations, not just courtrooms. Previous District Attorney Mike Ferguson recognized that when he suggested I be the DA in 2006 over 8 other attorneys in the office. He still recognized that. The sheriff recognized it. Crime Victims United, the biggest crime organization in California, and other law enforcement and community members. True, my opponent has been a deputy district attorney for many years and done many trials. I get that. I respect that. The simple fact is, when given the opportunity to manage the office, he fell short and did so in only 9 months. I've been at this for 12 years and developed networks with nearly every department in Nevada County, many businesses, community leaders, courts, nonprofit agencies, and we work well together achieving that one goal. It's public safety. And my record shows it. The numbers are there. We need to be diligent going into the future, because if we don't, Sacramento is going to continue to change the law, and we have to be prepared to interact with the people that are coming back from the state and the people that we can't send to the state and the people that we need to rehabilitate and reintegrate into our community. Otherwise, we're going to be in a bad way in the years to come. So I'd suggest that you ask yourself that question: how can I keep Nevada County safe? And I'd suggest re-elect Cliff Newell, the person with the experience and the vision and the proven record as a leader in the district attorney's office.
Thank you. Now we'll hear closing statements from candidate Glenn Jennings.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm elected your next district attorney, what I'll do is I will bring experience to this office. I'll be the most experienced prosecutor in that office. Again, your money is going to pay our salary. You're going to hire one of us at $183,000 a year. You can hire an administrator, or you can hire an vastly experienced prosecutor who knows how to handle cases. I can bring that to this office. I will mentor the young prosecutors. I will earn their respect. I will prosecute the high-profile cases that come into the office, which is part of the job description, something my opponent will not do and told you he won't do it. They will stick around. They will become experienced and more effective in the courtroom and make this a safer place. I can train them. I can train them in the proper filing techniques. We will eliminate a lot of this plea bargaining that's irritating a lot of you people out there by proper filing techniques. When we file a felony, I'll mean a felony. I won't give a misdemeanor later on down the road. So, again, when I worked up in Truckee, the Truckee Police Officers Association, they all work with me closely, and they endorsed me. They know me, they know my work product, they know my ethics, and they know my integrity. They also know my opponents in work ethic, and they chose me. They want me to be your next district attorney. Again, it's your choice, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for a change. You're getting a new sheriff. It's time for a change in the DA's office also. There's some time limits, term limits in the legislature, 2 terms? My opponent here is now seeking his 4th term. It's time to freshen up the government. Again, a new sheriff, a new DA, a new Nevada County will make this place safer for you. Thank you. Vote for Glenn Jennings.
Thank you to the candidates for participating in this evening's forum. Applause. And thank you also to Ubinet, the Union, KVMR, KNCO, NCTV, and our audience for your excellent questions and courtesy. Now I'd like to welcome Bjorn back to the podium to close the program with some pertinent information.
Thank you very much, everybody. April is a full month of League forums. Every Thursday this month, we're hosting a candidate forum at 7 p.m. in this very room. Details and candidate information are available on our website, lwvwnc.org. Thursday, April 12th, we'll hear from the candidates for U.S. House of Representatives, District 1. Thursday, April 19th, we'll hear from the candidates for Board of Supervisors, District 3. And on Thursday, April 26th, we'll hear from the candidates for Nevada County Sheriff. In case you missed the presentation on the new way Nevada County voters will be voting, known as Voter's Choice, please pick up information on the League's table in the lobby. Ballots are mailed to all registered voters on May 7th and must be returned by June 5th. They may be returned to vote centers or drop-off locations or mailed into the elections office. For the latest information on upcoming elections, stay tuned to our local media outlets. Visit our website, lwvwnc.org, and be sure to follow us on our social media at lwvwnc. Have a great night, everybody.